of having potential energy can vibrate. So how prevalent do you think that vibrations are?
Prevalent.
If anything that has potential energy can vibrate, you might even go so far as to say that everything in life is vibrations. That's a pretty broad quote by this famous person. You might have heard of him. Then on the right here, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibrations. So, there's something going on here. So vibrations really do happen when you have some sort of energy exchange. So you have potential energy that gets converted into kinetic energy, and then it gets converted back into potential energy again. So the basics. So if you were to draw a free body diagram and then turn it into a kinetic body diagram where it has that extra bit of, that acceleration dashed line, you might have seen that in your statics and dynamics class. So basically, this is a second order differential equation. The double dot x has an m in front of it. So this is m times a, right? Where mass is m. Then we have c x dot, where x dot is velocity. And c is called a damping term. So if you have that term, it's the term that pulls energy out of your system. And this can take different forms in different systems. People have written many PhD dissertations just about this term. Think about that for a second. It gets complicated. This is a really nice, easy equation, but if you go in depth and you start trying to fit this sort of equation to physical systems, it can get much more complicated. And then kx, so k times position, where k is some sort of potential energy. What we usually see it as is a spring, like this green dashed line. And that spring has some sort of constant associated with it, where if you mash it so far, it will hold so much energy. And then on the right-hand side, we have this F cosine omega t, where F is just a scaling constant. It's just the amplitude of your forcing. If you had a speaker, you could think of F as just turning up the volume. That's it. That's literally it. And omega is your forcing frequency. So omega times t, you end up getting something where time is scaled by omega. So if you pick a bigger omega, it's like this cosine is going faster or slower. So bigger omega would be faster, slow, faster.
Yes.
So you could think about it as being, if I wanted to get to 1 for a time, or if I wanted to get to 1 for the thing inside the parenthesis, and I put in a big number, I would get there faster. So it's a faster frequency. And so this on the left, this is free response vibration. So some nice people made this wonderful GIF. So we can see this, mass. It's moving along. We have a spring, so it's converting potential energy of the spring to kinetic energy of the mass. And then here, this blue box is called a damper, a viscous damper. So it has a paddle, and the paddle moves through some sort of fluid. When it moves through the fluid eats up some of the energy. And it isn't reversible, so that energy is just lost. So here, we start off with some nice potential energy, and then this damper just kills all of it. So a few examples. So, here we see this high-speed camera capturing a string vibrating. We have this other high-speed camera capturing this cymbal. So a cymbal is a plate. So that's a continuous structure. So that's very late in the semester. Actually, a string is also a continuous structure. So it's also very late in the semester. This is actually a journal paper about a Japanese flute, and then they used all of these nice particle image velocimetry readings. So they measured little particles flying over the top of this Japanese flute. And you can map out the vibrations associated with that from the particles. How crazy is that? It's pretty neat, right? Like, that's some hardcore research. Let's pull up this video. So let me just tell you what's happening here. So this is a little device. This area right here is just spinning. And then they attach a string to it, and then the person pulls on the string. So notice that's a very prominent shape, right? Like, that's just exactly a sine wave, basically, right? So what about now? It's more of a sine wave. There wasn't really anything in the middle, though, right? Like, there wasn't some intermediate shape. So right there, it's what we call a transient response. So it's not behaving nicely. That's usually what transient means. So you hope that it gets out of this area and starts behaving nicely again. And then mode 3. So these mode shapes have several, it's a function of several parameters. So one of them is how fast I'm spinning this. Well, I'm not spinning this. And then also how long the string is and how flexible the string is. So those 3 pieces of information give you those different mode shapes. This is kind of cool. So if you don't have a really high-speed camera, use a high-speed or a low-speed camera and a stroboscope. Let me skip through, get to the good stuff. So you don't have a high-speed camera, but you can just stroboscope this thing. Okay. I posted these slides, so you know you can take some time, show your roommates later if you want to. So, oh, I should have told you to look away if you were squeamish. These are vocal cords. I think that's done. That's important. So actually, vocal cord dynamics, I know people getting PhDs in just that. So it's a very complicated response. Where did my vibration slides go? Okay. So it comes up in a lot of music is the takeaway point there. So structural vibrations. So I think everybody here is a mechanical engineer. Structural vibrations come up in any mechanical problem you have. That you might just not notice them. And hopefully you don't notice them if they pose a problem. So if you get really long structures that are flexible, vibrations become a significant problem. So this Taipei Tower, Taipei 101, it's a very tall building. I forget how many floors it is. But if you build skyscrapers, you need to take vibrations into account. So what these really tall buildings do is they put some large mass at the top. So that's this ball at the top. and they can use that to control the vibrations. So it's kind of an energy intensive operation because it's very energy intensive to move large masses. So if the building is starting to vibrate, this mass starts counteracting that to keep the building steady. This on the right is this really cool airplane designed by NASA. So it holds the world's record for the highest flying airplane. So the way they did that is they made it really lightweight. But when you make something really lightweight, it makes it very thin. And when you make something thin and flexible, vibrations become terrible. So the way they got this thing to be the highest flying world record was also its downfall. So here on the right, this is where the vibrations caused it to explode. Okay? Literally, planes will fall out of the air if this isn't taken into account properly. So wanted to show a few videos of structures where mechanical engineers didn't pay attention in vibrations class. So this was a very famous bridge in the UK. I think this is opening day. And it turns out that when people walk over the bridge vibrates. And then when the bridge vibrates, all the people want to step to the left. And when they step to the left, it makes the bridge move to the left, which makes all the people step to the right. Ad infinitum, and then you get this bridge that had to close. So there's this like multi-million-dollar bridge that it got in the news a lot. And this is the reason why. It made people sort of nauseous. This is the same reason that, like in the 16 or 1700s, armies started breaking step when they'd walk across bridges. Because if you march in step across a bridge, it might make the bridge collapse. So it's a well-known phenomena. This is an old-timey video. That's a little scary, right? This is called flutter. So flutter happens when there's something called a Hopf bifurcation. So Hopf bifurcations are a type of nonlinear vibration. We won't cover that in the class. Don't worry, it gets complicated. But see, mode 2. But when they happen, you go from a stable stationary state to a stable limit cycle. So this is called limit cycle motion, where you get these types of vibrations. So they're quite prevalent. Wait for it. So these are situations where vibrations are bad. I think everybody realizes that. Oh yeah, I wanted to skip to the end to see some of these. It's flapping its wings as hard as it can, but just can't stay up. Yeah, it's done. Okay, and then this is some sort of lab experiments where they show some flutter. One more video for structures. This is just a wooden beam. So this is what you call a system ID. So if you wanted to find the spring stiffness of a piece of wood, you quite literally just hit it with a sledgehammer. So this is some work that the mechanical engineering department is starting to do with the School of Forestry. So the School of Forestry is interested in what the mechanical properties of wood mean to the chemical properties of wood. So it would tell you maybe when to cut trees instead of cutting them too early or too late. So that's all interesting, I think. And I think that's a good motivation. But one of the things I'm most interested in is some of the following slides. So when you have situations that are capable, if you have 1 degree of freedom vibratory system, so you just have a mass spring damper, that's interesting. You know, you can teach a class about it. That's great. But if you take many of those and then couple them together in some really peculiar way, some strange things happen. So this is neurons. So if you kind of watch carefully, you'll see that every once in a while the whole screen sort of flashes. You see that? So it turns out that if you just took some brain cells and started growing them in a Petri dish, brain cells want to connect to each other. And once they connect to each other, they'll start doing this. And it's because neurons actually act like mass spring damper systems. So there's actually a whole class of neuron research that just models neurons as coupled oscillators and sees what it can do. So that's pretty interesting and pervasive. So that's happening right now in everybody's brains. Let me skip ahead a little bit. So these are fireflies. So what do you notice about that? So somebody told all these fireflies to start flashing at the same time, right? So you got large groups of fireflies and they all synchronize somehow. So it turns out that fireflies, when they see another firefly blink, they want to blink. That's actually a kind of potential energy. So if you start pulling on when one blinks, they want to blink together. So they want to couple together and blink at the same time. And the same sort of phenomena actually happens in many other systems, such as fish flocking and birds flying, because they want to have some optimal distance between each other. Oh, that's a good example right here, where you see a large group. So you see this traveling wave going from the right to the left. And the artwork here, just to say what this is. So this is some micro etchings. So this is the same sort of micro etchings that happen with MEMS fabrication. And on the right, this is a slime mold maze. So slime mold is a one-celled organism, and they couple together and are able to communicate information to each other. So people realize that you can use slime mold to solve mazes. You should look that up later if you don't believe me. It's pretty interesting. So some of my research, so this is literally a coupled oscillator array. So these beams are oscillators. They have magnets above them that vibrate. No, I said that wrong. The magnets above them give you some sort of potential energy. And then this round thing on the left-hand side is a shaker, which vibrates the whole system. And you see here, there's this one oscillator in the middle that's moving a lot, and all the other ones aren't moving hardly at all. So actually, it turns out that the information you find in this class will tell you that this shouldn't happen. So this is a special case which is related to the right figure. This is the figure on the right is something called a Josephson junction. So it's this quantum mechanical device that might be used in quantum computing in the future. Okay, so that's a lot of examples. So I wanted to close with one sort of inclusive example that ties a few of these things together. So when you're playing the piano, first thing that happens is you impact a string. So that's literally section 6.2 and 6.3 in the book. So the whole experience, though, after you impact the string, the acoustics is what happens when the string vibrates, and it vibrates the air around the string. And that, propels around the room. And then, at some point it reaches the microphone. So the microphone is a little mass, and when it has those pressure differentials from the air, it vibrates. So that's also a transient response, and that's literally section 6.5 in the book. From there, the microphone has to be digitized so your computer can read it. So your computer is digital instead of analog. So for something to be digitized, first thing, you need to somehow break out how many samples you're going to take in a second. So this microphone read at 48,000 frames per second, or measurements per second. So you need some sort of electrical oscillator embedded in your computer to tell your computer to do that. That's also a huge subdiscipline, like timing and computers and experimentation. So at that point, you need to do some signal processing. That'll come kind of as the semester goes along. So we'll do lots of simulations, how to back out data from experimental data. And at that point, so the recording was recorded with a camera and a microphone, so those need to be synchronized. So you have to synchronize this to the camera, and then this on the bottom is called a fast Fourier transform. So a fast Fourier transform is something that you'll be able to do by the end of the semester, actually probably within the next month or two. So this shows you what frequency content is in the microphone. So you import this microphone data, and then you're able to find what frequency components are there. So now we're playing this on this computer, so there's all this extra signal processing happening. This computer has its own timer to keep playing the video. And then the speakers are shooting acoustics out into the room. That's making little hairs in your ear vibrate. And those hairs all have different lengths. So those different lengths correspond to separate frequencies.